Welcome back. All right, I look at list videos and there's often I don't know a skew towards the negative. I look at view counts on like some of the movie channels that I follow and whatnot, and when it's a biggest flops, biggest mistakes, those often will get more hits. But here's the thing: there's a lot of negativity in general right now, so I don't want to just throw more negativity on the fire. Like I thought about doing like worst contract on every team. Nah, we'll save that for the off season and that kind of thing. I want to talk about feel good stories because every team I think has one player who is a feel good story from this year, and there's various reasons for that. So I'm wearing my Roadrunners jersey, the AHL affiliate for the Arizona Coyotes, because they were kind of a feel good story winning in Henderson the other night, and yeah, it's not a common thing to go into Henderson and come up with a win. They've got those fancy silver helmets and all that, so you know um, which looks better with the Henderson jerseys than the gold helmets look with the gray Vegas jerseys. It's just, yeah, I'm just throwing that out there. The Henderson one's definitely that suits. Vegas one's not as much. I get what they're going for, but it's silly. So yeah, 31 feel good stories from players, and again, I'll write the list up here, and I'll explain why with each one. And I'll try to make sure this is done in a decent amount of time. Brevity's the soul of wit, right? All right, for Vegas, so we're starting with the Vegas Golden Knights. I think the best feel-good story for them, honestly, is the obvious one. Marc-Andre Fleury, for all the talk about how, well, he's probably done. They're probably going to move on from Fleury. Well, this Fleury story, he's probably going to... Just the cap hit, right? No, he's been great this year. Arguably having his best regular season ever and a legit threat for the Vezina this year. It's been a great story that, again, gets reported on a ton, but I wanted to throw it in here as well because I'm like, yeah, and there are other good stories too going on with Vegas, but I don't think any of them eclipse Fleury. Winnipeg. So Winnipeg, of course, was stuck in the whole Patrick Laine loop for years. And Andrew Kopp has kind of emerged as this great story. So with the exit of Patrick Laine, it's allowed a guy like Kopp to get more ice time and maybe ice time in different situations. And he's shown he can score. He's shown he's a very competitive, decent scorer as well. So we'll see what happens with Winnipeg in the offseason. You have to think they're going to do everything they can to make sure that Kopp's not the one going to Seattle. I don't know what they're going to do with the Seattle expansion. That'll be a video for me to do as well with this 31 concept. I want to do one on 31 players that teams are going to have to figure out what they're going to do before the expansion draft. One for each team that they're going to be worried about losing, or that they may decide to make that trade. We'll see what happens. But yeah, Andrew Kopp now has made it so that his spot in that roster is really, really quite solid. Anaheim. So Anaheim's had a rough year, right? And I thought about Anthony Stolarz as being a feel-good story. But I'm going another direction here. Jamie Drysdale. When Jamie Drysdale was drafted, there was some feeling that, well, it's going to take him a while. He's probably not going to be ready out of the gate. Which, he did play in the minors, and now here he is. And every game he's getting more ice time. So while Anaheim's had a rough year, Jamie Drysdale's been this really good story on the blue line. I think it's been great to watch him. There were a couple others I looked at. I looked at Comtois, for instance, but I thought, no, the Drysdale and the fact that he's taking that next step. Each game, he seems to be playing more and more important minutes. That's a great story for the future for the Anaheim Ducks. Team that's got other prospects coming in. Of course, Zegras is rated as the number one prospect by Hockey News' Future Watch. So, yeah, everything's looking pretty good for Anaheim's future. Buffalo. And this is the reason that I'm doing this list, because it's hard to come up with, a feel-good story for every team. But with Buffalo, there's one that's emerged. And it's emerged at a time where it wasn't expected, which is kind of how these things work. Casey Mittelstadt. So Buffalo, 2 months ago, we're talking about Mittelstadt, and it's just not working. He's not, he's probably going to be a guy Buffalo looks at moving on from in the offseason, because everything pointed to him possibly being a bust at the NHL level. He's been fantastic for the last month. He has become the player he was, I want to say, at the start of last season. Start of last season, I thought he looked really good, and then it just fell right off the map. And so Middlestad this year kind of done the opposite, where it didn't look great to start the season. Now it's been fantastic. So if you want to make an argument for keeping Don Granato, you don't have to just look at the record. Look at how the players are playing under him, and especially Casey Middlestad. It's been a good story. Colorado. There were a few I could have gone with. I could have gone with Grubauer. But I'm going with Samuel Girard, and there's a reason. So this is a team with Cale Makar on it. And I would argue Girard, and I would argue you could say Girard's been their best overall defenseman. That if you're going to get into, well, who deserves Norris votes, Girard might be the guy that you'd put up there ahead of Makar. Makar is absolutely fantastic. I love Cale Makar. Girard has been so good from the start of this season. Looks absolutely fantastic. Brilliant deals made by Joe Sakic, bringing in Girard, a draft pick that became Byron. You get a draft pick that becomes Makar. Yeah, it's all kind of fantastic if you're Joe Sakic, and that blue line has been completely revamped. Devon Taves was another one I thought about putting up there. Basically, if you're a defenseman in Colorado, other than Eric Johnson due to injury, but yeah, it's been quite the story for him. Detroit, and of course there's a feel-good story with Detroit. I thought about Bernier. Bernier was one I thought might be, but I'm going with Adam Erne. Adam Erne, with the streak that he's been on lately, it's very impressive. He's showing an offensive upside that I haven't seen in the National Hockey League. I remember the scouting reports before he reached the NHL saying that was there. What we're seeing in Detroit right now, though, is next level. It's been absolutely great. And so, yeah, good story out of Detroit for him. Montreal, there were a few I could have gone with there, too. But I'm going with the one that they got from Vancouver, Tyler Toffoli. Toffoli, 21 goals so far this season is ridiculous. And here's the thing. So we can talk about the Canucks and not getting him signed. I don't think anybody saw what would be a 40-goal pace over an 82-game schedule coming out of Tyler Toffoli this year. I think 20, 25, maybe 30-goal pace, sure. 40 is insane, and yet he's been dangerous in games where he hasn't scored. Toffoli it's been such a natural fit with Montreal. And again, I don't know that it would have worked out that way in Vancouver. We don't have any way of knowing. We can just speculate. But I really think Toffoli found the perfect fit in Montreal. Ottawa, which is on this back page here. Ottawa, again, there were a few that I thought about. But with the recent goal-scoring streak, Connor Brown. Connor Brown is one of the more underrated forwards in the NHL. And he proves it year after year after year. And then it feels like he's underrated following seasons as well. His goal scoring has been fantastic. He has natural instincts for goal scoring and all that. And I think Ottawa's got themselves quite the player in Connor Brown, who, when he went to Ottawa, there was no fanfare for it. The other one I thought about putting there was Ryan Dzingel, but his goal scoring's dropped off a bit. I also thought about Batherson. There have been some good stories. I even thought about Forsberg, because Anton Forsberg goes there and plays pretty well as the number 4 goalie wearing the wrong colored pads. St. Louis. St. Louis was tough. St. Louis, I end up going with Justin Falk. No, it's not just because of his mustache. When Alex Pietrangelo leaves and goes to Vegas, the expectation was that a lot of ice time and responsibility would go to Justin Falk, and I think it has. Now, offensively, he is not in the same range as Pietrangelo, but that's why you go out and get Torrey Krug. Falk has been a really good all-around presence on the blue line. He's got a good shot. He's a very good defensive defenseman as well, and he does seem to have some of that leadership skill as well for the St. Louis Blues. So Falk has been pretty consistent throughout the season, and yeah, I mean, it's possible between now and the end of the season he ends up with 10 goals. I think he's at 6 right now, so it's probably not, but maybe. At the very least, though, I think Falk's done a good job of justifying his contract this year. I will say that. Toronto. To me, if it's going to be a feel-good situation with Toronto, I think it's a guy who's united fans everywhere. So even if you're not a fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs, you have to say the Jack Campbell story's been a good one. And he seems like such a really nice, genuine guy. He seems like your Canadian stereotype of somebody that you can run into and they'll be like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have been standing there. That's my bad. Which I will say, that's a legit thing. Canadians will apologize if you run into them. But yeah, Jack Campbell is like, he's a great guy. He's always sort of, winking at his teammates and giving them a pat on the back, even when they screw up. And even opponents who bump into him, he'll, give him a pat on the back and wink. It's fine. It's good. And you see him in his post-game interviews, and he just seems like such a really genuine, great guy. So that's a good story there for Toronto. Part of the reason that you're getting this video today. Moving on to Arizona. I picked for Arizona Jakob Chychrun. Watching the development of Jakob Chychrun for Arizona over the last, I'll say, 2 seasons has been remarkable. Because early on in his career, I didn't really see it. Like, I thought, okay, so he's a good, probably stay-at-home defenseman. Good first pass. I don't know. But this year, the goal scoring and just everything he does, and it feels like he's going to be a workhorse on the Arizona blue line for as long as he wants to be there. And eventually, he'll be one of those defensemen that just gets massive, massive money. Because, again, he's not going to get as much attention being in Arizona as he would in one of the more major centers, especially for, the really popular or really unpopular, in Boston's case, kind of players. But these guys get more press. Jakob Chychrun is a legit fantastic defenseman. And so when I hear, people say, well, maybe Norris level at some point. Yeah, I could see that with Chychrun now. And again, I didn't really see that as much a couple years ago. Carolina. For me with Carolina, and again, there could have been a few here. I'll go with Jordan Staal. Really great year for Jordan Staal. He's reached 1,000 games. Might be having his best season ever in the National Hockey League. To me, again, I had to say, so Jordan Stahl's been a really good story for Carolina, a team that's got its share of really good stories. I'll go with Jordan Staal. Dallas. Went with a veteran on Dallas as well. And I debated about this one too, because Robertson's been just fantastic. And Rope Hintz, great going, playing injured and still playing really well and putting up about a point a game. But to me, it's Joe Pavelski. Last season, during the regular season, it wasn't a great fit in Dallas. And then in the postseason, in the playoffs, absolutely fantastic run by Pavelski. And now in the regular season, he's kind of picked up where he left off in the playoffs. He wasn't able to keep up that 2-point-a-game pace he had early on. But still, he's right around a point a game for the season, which is well and above what was expected of him. At least on my part, I didn't expect this. I don't know there were very many Dallas fans that would have expected this level of production. So it's been a really good story. In a league that keeps getting younger, it's always nice to see veterans who play really well, like Pavelski has. Oilers. There were a couple of ways I could have gone with the Oilers. But I'm going with Jesse Puljujarvi. Jesse Puljujarvi's jumped right back into the NHL. He's kind of reinvented himself in that he's not scoring at the level that we would have expected before he reached the NHL. But he's not hurting the team. He's playing very well. And it's been a good fit the second time around. So even if he's only a 20-goal scorer with 40 points every year from here on, that still feels pretty good. That still feels like it's a good level for a player who doesn't really have to be the star because you've got McDavid, you've got Draisaitl. So Puljujarvi, the pressure isn't there for him to be that star player, but I think he's kind of done a good job of changing his game enough, and I think a lot of it is going to be unselfishness with younger players as they get older, and playing for the team rather than for their own paycheck down the road. I have great respect for players who can do that. I understand why guys would be like, I'd really actually like to make a lot more money, but also for those players who say I'll sacrifice a couple $1 million down the road if I can have a championship, it's pretty respectable. The Islanders. The Islanders was tough. The Islanders, really, most of the players we kind of expected exactly what's happened this year. But I think a really good story this year has been Noah Dobson. So last year, Noah Dobson was a healthy scratch a lot. He wasn't getting a lot of minutes. There were concerns about whether or not it was hurting his development. He's been great this year. It's been seamless. He has been a fantastic top 6 defenseman. He's going to work his way up to being a regular top 4 defenseman in the NHL. The way that he's being brought along by the Islanders looks kind of sort of perfect. So, Noah Dobson, good story for them. Pittsburgh. This is kind of underreported, so I'm going to throw this up here. Chris Letang's putting up good points totals. His plus-minus is solid. and he hasn't been hurt yet this season. So Chris Letang, a player that you're always kind of worried about whether or not he's going to get hurt. So far for Letang this year, it's been a good run. He's honestly, it's been a good run for him, and I really hope he keeps that up. Again, I don't know how close to a Norris he may end up getting at his best, but he is underrated at this stage in his career. I will say that, and yeah, he's been decent for a team that hasn't shown that they're willing to fade away just yet in Pittsburgh. Nashville. So UC Saros became the starter for Nashville right during the return to play. Then it was kind of a slow start for him. Then there's injuries as well. But in Nashville's coming back from the dead over the last the last month and a half, UC Saros has been a huge part of that. So to me, when I'm looking at Nashville and I'm like, all right, well, what's been the feel good story this year? I think Saros' development and really grabbing that mantle as the starting goaltender has been a really good story. Pekka Rinne is still a very good goaltender, but Saros is the guy, should be the guy going forward. And I think he's shown this year that, again, you may have to worry about injuries with him. That may just be how his career goes. But when he's healthy and when he's on, he can be amongst one of the best in the league. LA. It's been a bit of a tough slog for them lately. But I'm going to go with Dustin Brown. You know, the year off, well, 9 months off, right, between games, I think helped the veterans on this team, Doughty, Kopitar, and Brown. And for me, Brown, the 16 goals he's had this year, again, another player that's kind of slowed down goal-scoring-wise recently. But he's had a really good run, and he's shown that he's probably further away from retirement than others might have suggested last year. So Dustin Brown, I think, has been a good story for LA. Columbus was tough. Just going to say Columbus was a tough one. Because they're all either injured, traded, healthy scratched, down statistically. So, yeah. And I had to go with somebody who was a healthy scratch not that long ago. But the good story with Jack Roslovic is simple. He seems to want to play in Columbus. His play in Columbus has been better than it was in Winnipeg. And there's still room for his stats to grow over the next couple of years. And so I think Roslovic's been a pretty good story on what's been kind of a nightmare scenario for the Columbus Blue Jackets. So I went with Jack as the feel-good story. Again, you guys can give me any names you want for who you think's been the feel-good story for any team on the board. No problem. Chicago. When people take this really, really seriously, I always wonder, why? What? It's just a list video where I just discuss, like, these are good stories. Next up. So there were a couple I could have gone with. I could have gone with Duncan Keith because he's had kind of a resurgent season this year. And so I went with Alex DeBrincat. DeBrincat last year, it was a down year. And I never really wavered in my support of Alex DeBrincat. He's been one of my favorite players since before he reached the NHL. When he was drafted, I was like, why did they all pass on him in the first round? They're going to regret it. I think they do. DeBrincat's resurgence this year has been absolutely fantastic. So even if Chicago ends up not being able to make it to the playoffs this year, their future looks pretty good with guys like DeBrincat, Kirby Dach, and Patrick Kane looks like he could play until he's 40. So there's a lot of positives here, especially considering they were without Taves all season. Boston, and this is a story that's kind of slowed down lately, but I'm still going to have Nick Ritchie on there for Boston. Nick Ritchie coming out of the bubble, coming out of that playoffs, he didn't look like he worked at all as a Bruin. Like it looked like it was a bad fit, and he was in the box a lot. And so that was a bit of an issue. But this year he's been really good. I haven't seen nearly as many penalties where I've gone, oh, come on, Nick, what are you thinking? And I had that when he was in Anaheim and definitely when he was traded to Boston as well. This year's been pretty good for Nick Ritchie. The scoring was better at the start than it has been lately, but still, Nick Ritchie I think has been pretty solid top 9 option for the Boston Bruins. Florida. So Florida, I could have gone with a bunch too, because there are a lot of good stories. but to me, Carter Verhaeghe is a step above all the rest. Yeah, I mean, we were all like, well, we'll see what he does in Florida. This wasn't expected. We've got 17 goals right now. It's insane. So, yeah, Verhaeghe has been a great story for a Florida Panthers team that has probably been one of the better stories in the NHL. Minnesota. There were a few I could have gone with. I thought about Matt Zuccarello. I thought about Victor Rask. I'm going with Cam Talbot. At the time that Minnesota signs Talbot, there were very few that looked and said that'll improve things in Minnesota. Now there's Kakkonen and Talbot, it's just going to be so much better because of course it was Stalock and Dubnyk last year. Stalock outplayed Dubnyk. Stalock had a half decent season, and then of course he was injured coming into this year. So I don't think we expected one of Minnesota's turnaround bright points to be adding Cam Talbot and going with Kakkonen as the backup / other starter. More of a 1A, 1B situation, right? Talbot's been really good for Minnesota. So once again, he proves people wrong. They're like, he's overrated. He's fine. He can go. It's fine. Just let him go. He's a good goaltender. He can go on good runs. He's been decent for Minnesota this year. New Jersey. You know how hard I thought about this? Like, seriously. And finally I went, you know what, Jack Hughes. All the bust talk last year, the fact that he has performed quite well this year, even when he's not producing points, he's still very prominent out there. He's a very good player. Very complimentary from any announced team that you see, that you watch for Devils games. So, like yesterday I'm watching the Rangers announcers during the Devils game, and very complimentary of Jack Hughes and the way he's playing the game. I thought about putting Sharon Govich up there, absolutely. I thought about putting up Ty Smith, absolutely. And on some level, Mackenzie Blackwood, because I think he's shown, he's for real. He's going to be an NHL starter for the Devils for quite a while to come. But I went with Jack Hughes. Rangers. So one video I'm going to do at some point, probably in the off season now because of how late we are into the regular season. I'm going to talk about where did they come from. And Colin Blackwell would be definitely the addition to that list for the New York Rangers. When they picked up Blackwell, it's not like anybody went, yes, that's going to be a huge scoring threat for the Rangers. I mean, he was a good, hardworking player, but this scoring upside the Rangers have brought out of him, it's been fantastic. So, as surprising as it would have been early on in the season to see him on the score sheet, it's not now. Blackwell's legit, and yeah, we'll see what his future holds in New York with the Rangers. But this is a team that can score. They have a lot of depth there, and I know people label Kakko as a bust. I don't think he's going to be, but again, we'll see what happens, right? Philadelphia, I had 2. So, because this is the one team where I had an issue, and I was like, I can't just have one. It's going to have to be 2. I'm going to explain both. James Van Riemsdyk, contract that at times has been called just awful. A terrible contract, and he's not producing, and he's slow. I've heard all this. He's slow. He's not good. He's done, and yet he's had this resurgence this year. Yeah, he went a while in between goals till he got one in the last game, but or not the last game, the game before that. But yeah, he's had a very good resurgent season in the NHL. So James Van Riemsdyk's there. But you look at last night's game, which was Hockey Fights Cancer Night, and all of his teammates came out wearing a 23 for Oscar Lindblom. So there's 2 feel-good stories here for the Rangers. And Nolan Patrick would have been there if he was healthy right now, which he's not. So we all have our fingers crossed on that one, right? So James Van Riemsdyk on his performance, and Oscar Lindblom just his presence in the lineup. The scoring hasn't been where it was, say, last year, but I don't think that matters as much. I think the fact that he's in the lineup, he's playing, I think is huge for the Philadelphia Flyers, and it is a feel-good story. Again, at a time when we need it, right? San Jose. There's just so much negativity elsewhere. So I'm trying to just throw a video into your feed today that won't have that negativity. You're welcome. All right. Just kidding. Well, not about... Anyways. All right. Let's see. San Jose. Now, I have been a very vocal fan of Rudolph's Balcers for years. Did not expect him to look as dangerous as he's looked with San Jose. Every game he has multiple rushes at the net. If he ever gets that finishing ability up to that next level, he's a 25 goal scorer. And maybe a 30 goal scorer. And it's remarkable because, of course, Ottawa just kind of lets him go. Because they didn't see it. Neither did I. I legit didn't see it. And now in San Jose, it's just been such a good fit for them. And yeah, they need that. They need good players who have upside that aren't, costing them $11 million in cap space to offset some of the guys that are costing them a lot in cap space. So Balcers has been quite the steal for them. Tampa Bay. I don't think Ross Colton was expected to be as strong of an offensive force as he's been. I don't know that that'll be his game long term, but it's been a great story. So greatly appreciate what Ross Colton's been able to do so far. Very competitive forward. There's more to his game than scoring. And again, it kind of reminds me when Marcus Foligno joined the NHL and he had a lot of scoring out of the gate for Buffalo. And that really wasn't where Marcus Foligno's career was going. And with Colton, I maybe it is because he's in Tampa and everybody that Tampa touches seems to turn to gold. But we'll see. We'll see where Colton ends up in the long term. The good news for him is because there will always be that cap issue with Tampa, there will always be openings for young players. Every year there'll be openings for new players. He's earned himself a shot at a more prominent role next year. Vancouver. There were a couple I could have used for Vancouver. I'm going with Brock Besser. Last year, there were tons of rumors about Besser and whether or not Vancouver wanted to keep him. And I don't know how legit the idea of moving on from Besser might have been, but it was really out there. And I'm glad they didn't trade him. I'm glad they held on to him. And so far this year, he's been arguably the best goal scorer for the Canucks. I know he's tied right now with Bo Horvat. Bo Horvat, I think, is the hardest working forward on the team. And Besser, I think, is the best natural goal scorer on the team. If Elias Pettersson was in the lineup and playing regularly and playing healthy, that might change the story. But he's not, and he hasn't been. So right now, I'd have to say Besser's the best goal scorer. And yeah, pretty good story for a guy who, again, as recently as a little over a year ago, was seen as probably being on his way out of town. Washington. It was not that long ago Daniel Sprong was seen as a fringe NHLer. Not that long ago being like December. So when he goes to Washington, again, no real expectations on him, which might be best. Sometimes it's best for the prospects to go to a team where there's no expectation. And going to Washington, they're known for being able to develop scorers pretty well. And Sprong, it's worked. It's clicked. So Sprong's forced other veteran players out of their jobs, out of their roles. Part of the reason Panik now has been traded off to Detroit isn't just cap. It's Sprong took his place. Sprong goes in, and it was Panik that was the healthy scratch. So Sprong's been quite the story. I thought about Connor Sherry for them as well, but I thought, no, I'll put Sprong on the board. Last team on the board is Calgary. So if you're a Flames fan, yeah, I saved the best for last. That's what I'm doing. You're very right. With Calgary, it was a bit of a challenge as well, but I'm going with Elias Lindholm. So when Lindholm had his breakthrough season a couple years ago, there was a debate about whether or not Lindholm was that good, or if this was just from playing with Johnny Gaudreau and Sean Monahan. I think he's that good. I think Lindholm on his own is a very good player. I liked him the whole time he was in Carolina. Kept picking him as like a breakthrough forward. It just never really worked. But I never stopped picking him. And he goes to Calgary, and now he's realized that potential, which is, again, one of those storylines I do want to do a video of on players who realize their potential on the next team or a few teams down the road. And Lindholm would be one of those guys. I think he's shown that he's a legit star player. I don't know about superstar. There's a difference between those two. But I think as a star player, yes, he's there. And on a Flames team that's underachieved, I think Lindholm's been good. But let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Which player do you think has been the feel-good story for a team you follow, or maybe a team you don't, that's not on the board? And hey, again, this is just my list. Just my little list of feel-good stories from around the NHL. Again, at a time where There's a lot of doom scrolling going on, so hey, no doom here. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.